Hello. I feel like I've been in a really weird slump lately creatively. Streaming just hasn't been doing it for me in the same way. And I think a part of that is because work and life have gotten more busy, and so I have less time to do it in general. But it's made streaming feel like so much more of a slog. And then I just don't get the creative satisfaction. So I want to go back and start doing my monster mashup videos again. I thought that might be a great way to get the juices flowing. I just want to get back in a rhythm of making things that I enjoy doing. So without further ado, it's time for another monster mashup. For my first monster back, I'm going to turn it over to the randomizer because I have no idea what monsters I want to work with. Alrighty, let's see what we're gonna get here. Okay, I know what a griffin is. What's a death tyrant though? Let me get these pulled up. Okay. So the death tyrant is one of those beholder-like creatures. And those little gemstones are its eyeballs. What's special though about a death tyrant? Because it's not just a beholder, right? There's gotta be something here. Let me scroll down and see what the flavor text says. Okay, here we are. On rare occasions, a beholder's sleeping mind imagines a reality in which it exists beyond death. When such dreams take hold, a beholder can transform its flesh, sloughing away to leave a death tyrant behind. Okay, so they're lich beholders. What if you had a beholder griffin? All right, it's been a couple hours, but I have a monster. May I present to you the Observant Hunter. The idea behind this monster is, what if instead of dreaming of living beyond death, a beholder dreamed of taking to the skies as an apex predator? That is the Observant Hunter. Let's start with the description of this creature. It is cursed as fuck. This is just a griffin with 10 eye stalks coming off of it. End of story. When a beholder transforms into an Observant Hunter, that Observant Hunter immediately takes to the sky and starts to seek out prides of griffins. See, its goal is to establish itself as the leader of a pride of griffins. Once it's found the pride it's going to rule, and proceeds to rule over the griffin's territory with an iron fist. As for how it manages to do that, we need to take a look back at that stat block. So the stat block is available on D&D Beyond as public homebrew. I'll put a link to it in the description down below. I recommend using the link rather than searching for it, because if you search for it, you may accidentally find my previous version of this creature where I mistakenly hit the publish button, even though I accidentally made it an undead, whereas I meant to make it an aberration, as you can see on the screen here. That's the only actual difference between that stat block and this stat block. But given that some abilities and spells and whatnot will impact different creature types differently, it was an important enough change that I decided to go ahead and just publish a second version with the corrected creature type. So whenever I'm making a new monster, my first step is to determine the challenge rating. In this case, I decided to go with CR 13. Beholders themselves are CR 13 and death tyrants are CR 14. Makes sense that there would be a slight power increase, as a death tyrant is essentially just a beholder turned lich. But for a beholder becoming a griffin, I couldn't really justify a challenge rating increase. From there, I picked armor class and hit points that are on par for a creature of this challenge rating, and I gave it the speeds that a griffin would have, since it is just a griffin's body. With regards to stats though, I decided to flip the beholder on its head a little bit, because thinking to myself, if the reason a beholder wanted to become a griffin was to rule the skies, it makes sense to me that perhaps it would gain some physical aptitude that was previously missing. So I decided to give it a very high strength of 22, as well as a dex of 16 and a con of 18 to capture that physical fortitude that this creature should have. I left the int as being high because it did maintain the eye stalks, and the original beholder is still in there in some capacity, but decided to give it a low wisdom and a very low charisma, just to kind of keep some balance within the stat block. By far, my favorite part of the stat block, though, is the cone of slow I've given this monster. So if you know anything about beholders and beholder-like creatures, they often have an eye in the middle of their eye stalks that emits this cone that they're able to point and move around, and depending on the creature, it has different effects. For the beholder, it's an anti-magic cone. For the death tyrant, it's an anti-life cone that prevents you from healing and whatnot. But for the Observant Hunter, I needed something a little bit more specific. See, the beholder became an Observant Hunter because it wanted to fly the skies and hunt. And so I wanted that cone effect to make it easier for this creature to hunt. In my mind, griffins primarily hunt by diving and scooping up prey off the ground, taking advantage of the fact that they're very fast flyers. And so a griffin's ideal prey would be incredibly slow. And so I gave the Observant Hunter the cone of slow, which makes it so any creature within the cone has its movement speed halved and cannot dash, essentially turning any creature of the Observant Hunter's choice into its perfect slow prey. Beyond that, taking a look at actions, I just combined the actions of a griffin with the actions of a beholder/death tyrant. Beholders and death tyrants both have the exact same eye ray options, and so considering that I was going to keep the observant hunter on the same challenge rating level as these two creatures, it made sense to me to keep those options as well. I also gave the creature a beak and a claws attack, just like the griffin has. And then, putting it all together into the multi-attack, I decided to have the observant hunter make one attack either with beaks or claws, followed by 2 eye ray attacks. I considered making the multi-attack 1 beak, 1 claw, 1 eye ray, but considering how powerful the eye ray is in comparison to the beak and claw, I thought that limiting it to only 1 eye ray per turn would just make this monster too weak to justify that CR 13, and I really wanted CR 13. As for legendary actions, I decided to keep it simple this time. Beholders and death tyrants both only get the eye ray as a legendary action, and so I decided to go ahead and just do the eye ray as well as a beak and the claws, keeping it simple and keeping it in line with the original inspiration for this monster. The final piece of the stat block is the lair and lair action section. So, as I mentioned earlier, the observant hunter is going to take up residence in its pride's eyrie. This eyrie is going to be located high up on a rocky cliffside in an area very windy and precarious, something only the griffins and the observant hunter can really easily access. While within its lair, I decided to give it 2 options for lair actions, one inspired by the beholder and death tyrant, and one inspired by the griffin. As for the one inspired by the beholder, this is taken directly from the beholder stat block as well as from the death tyrant stat block. All walls within 120 feet of the observant hunter suddenly sprout appendages that can grapple the players at the start of their turns. As for the lair action inspired by the griffin, I really wanted to lean into the fact that griffins are, at least in my mind, master flyers, incredibly strong and able to withstand heavy winds, which is why in part they're able to live in these rocky cliffside areas. So, what if while within its lair, the observant hunter was able to whip up those winds? And so, when the observant hunter does use its lair action to whip up those winds, it's going to potentially knock the players prone at the start of their turns. As for regional effects, I took a similar approach to lair actions, where there's one regional effect that's more inspired by the beholder and one regional effect that's more inspired by the griffin. As for the one inspired by the beholder, I went with the classic, creatures within a mile of the lair will feel like they're being watched. I just think this is such a fun effect. I remember one time being a player in a situation where there was a beholder nearby and we did not know, but every time we made perception checks, we felt like we were being watched but couldn't find the source of the watching. Every time we slept, we felt like there were eyes peering on us as we curled up in our bedrolls. It was very unnerving, and so I wanted to keep that effect for the observant hunter. As for the griffin-inspired regional effect, this I decided to keep in line with the lair action, and so winds within a mile of the creature's lair are unusually strong, meaning the rules for strong wind that are found in the DM's guide should apply here. And there you have it, the observant hunter. I think I actually ended up with a pretty interesting monster here, and I'm really excited to think of different ways to put this into one of my games. Like, for example, maybe there's a small village that knows griffins live nearby, but the griffins have never really been a problem up until a couple weeks ago, when suddenly, out of nowhere, the griffins started over-hunting and making it hard for the village to get food for themselves. Or maybe there's a remote village somewhere near the lair of this observant hunter that has entire mythology surrounding it. Maybe there are statues that they put in certain places as a way to ward off other predators. Maybe they scare children into behaving by warning that if they roam too far from the village, the million-eyed griffin will get them. Maybe they have their own name for this creature, or maybe they release livestock near its lair so it has things to hunt in an attempt to appease it. There are so many options. But with that, we've reached the end. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm planning on doing more of these in the future. My goal is at least 2 a month, if not more. Really, I'd like to be able to do 1 a week, but I just think that until I get into an editing rhythm, it's going to take me a little bit to build to that. Knowing that, hopefully I will see you next time. Bye-bye.